I'm delighted to welcome Ashley.Fleming and Elaine.Cameron from, well, first of all, Elaine's from the Refugee Survival Trust. She's the Chief Exec. Ashley.Fleming is a Senior Associate at Harper Macleod. She specialises in immigration. Very, very hot topics and quite relevant to some of the issues that we're facing in business, in society. And we're going to talk about some fairly important things, I would say. So Elaine and Ashley, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you,
You're
Sharon.
welcome. Good to be here.
So we're in, I can only describe it as a very different world from where I would have envisaged SAMS to be when we first set SAMS up. And my own naivety is that the world changes very quickly and then we have to react. And you know, the Ukraine has shown what that means, what it means to humans, and how that can affect people personally, but also what a business can do to help, or what humans can do to help, I suppose. But from a SAMS, from a Scotland Against Modern Slavery perspective, you know, we had a round table that was really quite intense, and you know, there was really good feedback from that. I'm going to try and get some of the key points out of you both, and the world has changed since that round table as well. So, you know, we'll maybe touch on Rwanda and the announcement by the UK government about how people claiming asylum would be processed through Rwanda as well. So, but let's get down to the first bits of what I want to talk about. You know, is that there's a labour shortage out there. Now, if I put my Brightwork hat on, it's a coincidence I've got my Brightwork polo shirt, but my Brightwork hat on is that not a day goes by when I don't have a business asking me, how do we get people from wherever in the world they are to work? And it's not as easy as that. And if you are somebody claiming asylum, you've come here through a process of fear, war, abuse, whatever it may be, and you've come here and you can't work straight away. And actually you can't work straight away, but you can't just walk into somewhere and start a job. And there's a lot of things that stop you from doing that. So I'm going to bring in Elaine on this first of all, if that's okay, Elaine, given your background. If I was to ask you, you know, somebody would say to me, asylum seeker, refugee, these people coming over here, taking our jobs. What's the story? Tell us what the background is to all of this.
Yeah, thank you, Shan. Yeah, and I think it is quite important, and I think it's an incredibly complex system for the average person to understand. And it's fair to say that what we hear in the media, and particularly from the current government, are words like illegal, criminal, evil criminals, gangs of illegal people. And I mean, this is not by accident that we're hearing this language continually. And unfortunately, what we're not hearing is the reality and the actual facts and figures. And at Refugee Survival Trust, we would like to be measured in evidence, because, you know, people seeking asylum are not these evil people who are criminals. And the idea of a person, the actual concept of even having someone who is illegal, who is seeking asylum, when you look at the UN Convention, is absolutely, it's absurd and it's shocking. And there is no, and Ashley would probably speak more about the legalities of that, because there is nothing in law that says you're illegal. And in fact, I would ask people to think about this when they're thinking about criminality and people that are illegal. There are no, as far as I'm aware, until today, aside from the Ukrainian visas thing, which is completely different, there are no legal ways of travelling to the UK for the specific purpose of claiming asylum. Okay, so ordinary people here, illegal criminals, and then I tell them, but there is no legal way to travel to the UK to claim asylum. So where does that leave people? So that's a starter. And I think looking at some numbers is really important. The UK is not overwhelmed with refugees. You know, in a country of 62 million people, I think they're lucky if we've got 1% of refugees. The UK is a rich, plentiful country. Yes, we've got issues, we've got social issues, but generally we're a country who can actually and should bring in refugees. And in Scotland, the Scottish Government will tell you that we want more people from other countries, because actually they're really beneficial to the economy. In terms of what you're saying in terms of the right to work, people seeking asylum don't have the right to work. And the current system says that after 12 months of waiting, which is a very long time to wait when you're not working and you're sitting in a small room, often all day, with no money and nothing to do, and your skills erode.
So they're not coming over here to take our jobs, basically, Elaine. That's what I wanted to clarify that line, because they can't take our jobs.
They can't take our jobs. And anyway, we've got loads of vacancies that aren't filled, and we've got huge labour shortages. So even if they were, that would probably be really helpful if they would come and take the jobs.
We have, at this point in time, 1.2 million vacancies in the UK economy. So they're coming over here, but they can't take our jobs.
They're coming over here and they're sitting in no choice, warehoused accommodation on £40 a week, not allowed to work, not allowed to use their skills, not allowed to use their intelligence, not allowed to use all the things that they can bring to this economy, and the Treasury's losing money. I was watching a parliamentary debate last week, and I quote, the government said, because the Lords have put forward a suggestion that, of course, people seeking asylum should be allowed to work, after 6 months, that's reasonable. And I heard a Conservative saying that would encourage evil criminals. That was the response. Ashley, do you think that'll encourage evil criminals?
No, of course it wouldn't. And I think, you just have to draw parallels with public opinion with the Ukraine situation. People don't look at those individuals who are fleeing war as evil criminals or illegal entrants or any of that, because it's how it's been, how the government, how the media has chosen to frame it. Nothing to do with the legal position whatsoever. And I think if anything, we need to take this and use it as a lesson to educate people who are not ordinarily familiar with the situation and how it works, and say, well, actually, these people that you view as in need of assistance and innocent of any wrongdoing should apply equally across the board to any asylum seeker, even if they are a single male who chooses to get on a dinghy across the English Channel, because they're all trying to get away from something for the same reason, and it's not to take our jobs.
No, it's not.
And actually, Elaine, can I and actually I'll say this to you, because it's not easy for anyone to work, to get the legal right to work in the UK. So once they are here, and if they are documented, if they claim asylum, right? Just keep it right. If they claim asylum, how much can they earn? How much do they get? And what do they get then? Because, there's this, I've grown up in Glasgow in the early 2000s and around North Glasgow, with that whole feeling of people used to say, oh, they're coming over here and they're getting the best flats and all that kind of thing. Is it true?
No, it's not true. It's not true. Actually, and again, Ashley said that it's extremely complex and difficult. The UK asylum system is extremely complicated, and that's actually when we hear all these things about criminality. Actually, the system causes a lot of the problems, and for some reason in the UK we can't seem to get, and I'm sure you'll relate to this, Shannon, a working analogy. I think the Home Office need to look at their KPIs, because there's some performance indicators that obviously there's some training and there's some development needs that need to go on in the Home Office, because the system could work a lot better. 85% of refugees are in employment before they come to the UK. Does that tell you that they're a bunch of unemployed criminals who are coming here? You get £40, I think it's just gone up to £40 odds. Yeah. Is that Ashley? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, but less than £40 and 85p or something. It was,
£40, 85p a week you get.
And what does that
and that's if everything goes okay.
And what can you use that money for then? Because it doesn't come, it's not cash, is it? It's on a card.
It's on a thing called an Aspen card, yeah. Well, you can use it for you can use it to get your food. You can't use it for transport unless obviously you cash it. You can use it for your food, but as we know, what's £40, 18 pence going to get you a week? The Home Office will tell you you've got your accommodation, but you're often in no choice shared accommodation. And actually, I think the last figures I've got is there's almost 400 people still in hotels in Glasgow. Sorry, not in Glasgow, Falkirk, East Kilbride, and another city, I think it might be Fife. So we've still got people, and there seems to be an intentional policy of putting people in hotel rooms. And the idea that that's fun. Sorry, Ashley.
No, I was just going to say that brings its own problems, because if you're giving someone the bare minimum in terms of money or money in kind to support themselves, and then you're putting them in facilities that are not suitable for someone to live day to day, and you see this as well, not just with asylum seekers, but with families perhaps with irregular immigration status that are put up in B&Bs by local authorities. You know, they haven't got cooking facilities, they haven't got the ability to cook a meal and to be able to use that money in a way that you can eke out the most of it. You know, you're looking at convenience and what they can do, and that's not being able then to provide for yourself or your family or any dependency you might have, some sort of balanced diet on that very little amount of money, never mind all the rest in terms of clothes or toiletries that you might also need on a day-to-day basis.
So, like, Ashley, can I ask here then, I'm just, I'm going to go on a history lesson first, because this is just something that just blows my mind, is that, I'm sitting here in Glasgow just now, this whole city was built on immigration of some shape or form. There was nothing here at all. And through industrial changes, and not just Irish immigration from the Highlands and Islands of Scotland, after falling Highland clearances, then Asian immigration, Eastern European migration, pre and post-war, Second World War, after the First World War, and then more recently as well. I'm here because my parents came and chose to settle in Glasgow because my dad got a job in Glasgow, and that's when I was born here. But so this is migration. This is a city that's built on it, and it's like, to me, it's made the world go round. This city wouldn't exist. The old industrial heartland of Scotland. But how hard is it then? So Elaine's just mentioned there, you can't. There is no legal way to get here. So if you're looking to come to the UK, or you're a business, let's take it from that example, from an immigration perspective, how can a business, or how can we employ somebody from outside the UK now post Brexit? What can we do?
Yeah, from a business perspective, then you've got two options really. It's to look at aside from the resident labour market in terms of British citizens or people who are settled here, you can either look at people here who are migrants, who might be on some sort of temporary work visa, family visa, or potentially asylum seekers with permission to work, which I think we can cover maybe separately, which is a very, very limited pool of individuals. Yeah. Or you have to look overseas. But in terms of looking overseas, that comes with so many hurdles, because the company will have to register with the Home Office to become a licensed sponsor, so they have to have a sponsor license, which passes immigration control essentially to the employers. They then have to act as many Home Offices, make sure that they as an organisation are meeting the requirements, and if they don't, then there's this fear that they would lose the licence, so they would then lose the right to employ those individuals. Those individuals would have their leave to remain curtailed or cancelled, and with that then they would have that decision of finding someone else to sponsor them, or being left with having to leave the UK. So I think what we've seen a lot over, probably say since 2008 really, when the points-based system was first introduced to the UK, we've seen a lot of outsourcing from the Home Office, and that's outsourcing of decision-making, of processing in terms of these application centres, of passing the buck to employers, to landlords, even when it comes to, most aspects of immigration control are now, there's always some sort of third-party organisation. Even if we're looking at people in the UK who might be here illegally and are detained in immigration detention centres, they're run by third-party organisations as well. So I think that's when you look at, Elaine's mentioned KPIs at the Home Office, but when you've got so many different organisations and different bodies that are involved, then you lose some of that cohesion in terms of sharing information, knowledge, making the system really work. I think when it's been so decentralised, and that's a problem, I think, day to day that we see.
Well, it sounds, it's not easy then. So if you're a business looking to bring somebody in, it's not easy.
It's not easy, and there's costs associated to it as well. So that can be the costs in terms of paying for the visas, or there's certain charges in terms of sponsoring individuals, such as a health surcharge, immigration skills surcharge, visa fees, license fees. And it's a bit of a minefield, because the last thing an employer wants to do is make any missteps in this, because if they were to get it wrong and employ someone that they weren't supposed to, then they face civil penalties and even criminal sanctions as well in the worst case scenario. So, we're looking at a maximum of £20,000 fine per illegal employee. And for a small company, that is a massive, amount of money and worry for them. It could be the question of whether the business remains viable or not. So I think from that perspective, there is a tendency in some organisations to shy away from employing foreign nationals, because they just don't have that confidence or knowledge in what's required or what they have to do, and so it's easier just to step away.
True, and I suppose your level of knowledge with regards to the immigration system is so important and so valuable, particularly to a business. Actually, that's why you do what you do, isn't it? Because it sounds to me, it's so complex that to try and navigate it yourself as a business, even a small to medium-sized business, it's just so difficult. I'm aware of the shortage occupation list, which is a list of occupations where people can come and work or apply through the immigration system to come. But some of the job titles on there just don't fit in what I think is, and I work in the recruitment industry, what fits is not fit for purpose. Is that something that you've seen in your?
Yeah, definitely. I think at the moment, particularly, I think we've had this perfect storm of a global pandemic and Brexit, and they've kind of collided to create these sort of circumstances where I think it's across the board, it's fair to say, that companies are struggling. So it might be that it's particular industries are hit hard, but then just your average company is struggling in some respects. So that there's a lot of people that have made the decision to move jobs during this pandemic. I'm one of them, and that leaves a whole new organisation, which a lot, particularly I think in the lower levels, they struggle to fill. I think industry-wise, we saw obviously before Christmas the impacts of Brexit checks and Brexit shortages, because there were temporary concessions to certain sectors. Pork butchers, HGV drivers, and I think there's some sort of poultry worker as well.
That's
Make sure we all had turkeys on the dinner table. But I think the effectiveness of those schemes was really, I don't think they were particularly effective, because they were so time limited. So they were allowing people to come in for a very short period of time to sort of fill this gap in the festive periods. And I think you've got to think about it that for one perspective smacks of arrogance, because it's saying, the UK is a wonderful place, you must want to come here, you should be grateful that we're giving you this really short period of time to leave everything behind and come and work here for a really short period. But also it doesn't address the bigger problem, the long-term needs to have a continual feeder of individuals who can do these jobs. It's all very well saying, well, let's skill up people that are already here. That takes time, and you can't look to education and training as a short-term option. So I think at the moment there's been other industries, so the food and drinks industry are the next one that have written to the government asking for consideration of some of their roles being put onto the shortage occupation list. The fishing industry, I think fish processing has also said, look, we're struggling with work. The most recent success has been care workers. They've been added as in February to the shortage occupation list. And but again, that industry, and then so the care industry, and then the ones I mentioned before Christmas, it's always like in reaction to something, as opposed to trying to address the problem head on. So, you know, it was Christmas, let's say Christmas, okay, tick, let's do that. And the next one, it's, well, we've just had COVID and we're still living with it, but the cave industry is on its knees, so let's make a concession to them. And they've been asking for this for a very long time, and it's taken a global pandemic for it to happen. So you've got to wonder what the other industries are going to have to do to get on that list, you know?
I think there's I see the risks of, you mentioned, you know, the food industry has been at the forefront of being at the risk of labour exploitation. The care industry had a very recent case of care workers that were all being exploited. And in North Wales, the recruitment agency that was supplying the workers was complicit in it. And I just see that even if looking to get labour from overseas becomes the way to fix the issue, then the risk of exploitation grows with that, because there's so many ways of exploitation increasing because of the value of labour and how that looks and how these people come here. And we get approached every day as a business by people purporting to be agents from countries out with the UK who have workers that are ready to work. It's like a gift. It's not true. Yeah. It's not true. It's like a gift. Where are they getting from? How are they getting processed? So it's quite scary. It's quite scary parts to it all. I think, you know, we're doing this podcast just to give a quick overview of how things are and what the situation is. I suppose, Elaine, let me direct this one at you. So in the last couple of weeks, the country Rwanda has been in the news a lot. And to me, it's a name that just came out of nowhere when it appeared in the news. What's the story here? What is going on? What is the UK government wanting to do and why?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can tell you the whole story, but I think all of what we're talking about is really interesting. So, okay, we can get to Rwanda, but Rwanda's probably the third, fourth, fifth, sixth thing. When we look at the UK government in terms of their human rights and in terms of their strategic plans, so when you're talking about UK labour shortages and you're talking about business and you're talking about tax and you're talking about, I would say the average person doesn't connect that to refugees or asylum. And the government are selling this as criminals. Let's get them out. And as Ashley says, I'm hearing a lot of people who don't feel very welcome here. I'm hearing from a lot of skilled people who are choosing to go elsewhere. They're choosing to go to America or to Australia or anywhere else, Canada as well. There are lots of people, and there are lots of people saying to me they'd much rather go to Ireland than ever come to the UK. So, you know, your messaging, they may be trying to send out one message, but they're certainly sending a clear message to people who actually don't see the UK as a welcoming place. And I'm very upset about that, and personally as a UK citizen. Rwanda, it's another arm in the Nationality and Borders Bill. It's another strategic move to move away from the UN 1951 Convention. And no country has ever left the 1951 UN Convention, as far as I'm aware. UK government haven't said they're leaving it, but they seem to be leaving it with their actions. Rwanda, taking aside Rwanda, who has very high rates of unemployment, it's not the point. I think the point is that the UK government are telling us that our government is actually unable to deal with a problem that every other country is dealing with. And I'm not saying every country is dealing successfully. Again, we're a country of 62 million people. We are approving, 22,000 asylum applications in a year, 0.02%. And we're telling everyone that we have to pay £163 million to a country that's 4,000 miles away because we can't put a system in place to just bring those people into our communities, integrate them as the whole world, it's a global issue, integrate them into our society and actually bring all these skills, experiences and knowledge, which is a wonderful thing through, migration. And we never hear that it's a wonderful thing. Of course it's a wonderful thing. So Rwanda, I was quite shocked to hear that they actually signed it. I think they've been going around to various countries trying to sign it, even exploring the ideas of putting people on oil rigs. Don't know if that was just a media one, but apparently they were looking at that as well. And they seem to have hit on a deal with Rwanda. So let's look at that as well. And the first thing I would ask our Home Secretary is, would she want to live there? Because although she took the media around to see these buildings, they're shared bedrooms, shared cooking facilities, shared kitchens, shared bathrooms, and shared living rooms. So are we saying, well, we are saying that anyone who has to leave their country through fear, persecution, famine, or war deserves to live in a shared facility, in a compound. And what I'm hearing is it's not only to process their application, but if they were successful, they would go ahead and potentially live there for 3 years.
That's the thing though, actually, Elaine, that's like the way that it's been spun is, oh, we're going to outsource processing of asylum claims to Rwanda, but it's not processing, it's you're outsourcing the people. You were trafficking essentially these people to a third country, and then that's it, you wash your hands.
Yeah, it's almost like as long as we can't see it, it's okay. And I was just looking at some of the, and I would encourage people actually just to go onto the internet and Google some of the biggest refugee camps in the world. Just take a minute, just Google refugee camps in the world, go and look at them, look at how long they've been established for, some of the worst and the biggest camps. And what happens generally is they get bigger and bigger and bigger. They become more unsanitary. More children are born there, and they become these kind of places where actually trafficking and criminality and abuse goes on within them. And they're often in places in the world where when we're going off to the shops or when we're buying our new car or we're going to Parliament for our day's work, we don't have to look at it. It's actually inhumane. It's awful. It literally is, as Ashley says. It almost feels as if we're going to traffic people to a country which has high rates of unemployment. So Shan, where are they going to get a job in Rwanda?
Yep.
How are they going to get a job and live a life in a country which has high rates of, I think their agriculture is 90% of what they do in Rwanda, because they don't really have, they've got mineral wealth, but that's an issue. So there isn't really anything there to do. So we're going to export all these potentially young men, but we're not sure if it might be women as well. We're going to put them in compounds, because that's what they are. You don't have your own bedroom, you don't have your own front door, you don't have your own bathroom, you don't have your own kitchen, you can't eat dinner on your own, and you're going to live in Rwanda. It's absolutely appalling. And actually, it's mind-boggling that the UK in 2022, 62 million people, a very rich country, can't successfully put a resettlement scheme. And that's what we would say to the UK, put a figure on a resettlement scheme. How many people contribute globally to your responsibility? Germany, Ashley, 150,000 in 12 months easily they take. We're lucky if we can take 22,000. We should be putting in a system that works. And the idea that we can't do that, there's something else behind that. There's some other mythology or ethic behind that is driving it.
Well, I think you're right. If you start with the mindset of that these are evil people, then you're going to do whatever you can to not have to deal with those individuals. Whereas that huge amount of money that's going to be spent on this Rwanda deal could be spent on improving the processing that is lacking at the moment. You know, if we were able to process the numbers quicker, we wouldn't have people waiting up to 3 years for a decision on their claim. That would be 3 years less of NAS support. Okay, it's only £40 a week, but when you've got a lot of people, that is going to add up. But that's not that individual's fault that's come here to claim asylum. They've got no control over the process. It's about the government being able to improve its scheme, and if that involves, you know, handing over responsibility out with the Home Office, and so be it. But there has to be some within the UK that is not to Rwanda. Then that's maybe what's got to happen for someone to get to grips of actually making sure that people are being dealt with humanely and in decent time.
Yeah, so you know, we're talking about Rwanda and we're talking about, but I think it's all part of the government's policy. And we talked about Brexit and they talked about immigration. Now, I'm not going to get into every other issue there has, but the Home Secretary and the government in the UK have got lots of issues, crime in particular, and the Home Secretary is talking a lot about evil criminals. And I'm really surprised that this evil criminals and illegal has been put at the door of, you know, something that accounts for maybe 1% of the entire UK population. There are many things I could talk about, but the crime against women, the rape conviction is its lowest it's ever been. The conviction for women, 3 women are being murdered every week in the UK, a woman's been raped. So I think that the people that I speak to on a daily basis are kind of, they bring this up, and when they hear the facts, they say, well, that's not what I understood it to be. And actually, I would want to pay my taxes for that. But I think most people actually don't understand, and I think it's a very cynical message coming from the government. And I wonder what we would do is in business and any other issue is look at it factually. I would encourage people to look at the facts, look at the crime rates in this country, look at the things that are really failing, look at our health service, look at social care. People seeking asylum are not bringing this country to our knees, and they have never been bringing this country to our knees. They're at the lowest rate since they've been since, I don't know, 2002, 2000 might have been the highest. It's been declining. This is not the major issue, and I would be asking ourselves, why are we seeing this in the newspapers? If we let people come here and we treated them with respect and we settled on a figure and realised that our part in the world and our global responsibilities and took a sensible approach, put a good system in place, which our Home Secretary, I've got to say, I mean, I think, Ashley, you'll know better than me, is it 6 times our Home Secretary's been in court and the court have found against her 6 times on this particular issue? We'll not include the bullying issue, which was something else, but in terms of immigration.
I mean, just talking about how many times she's been in court, there was a policy that was challenged during COVID about housing asylum seekers in old military barracks, right? And that was struck down as unlawful. Now, that was within our own country, where we were able to monitor, review, see exactly what's going on. So, harping back to Rwanda and sending people there for processing, we're not going to have that oversight. And even when we had it here, we still got it wrong. So it's just asking for a whole host.
Ashley, am I right in saying that when the HM director in charge of prisons actually inspected that facility and was involved in that and said they hadn't seen such bad conditions since like 50 years ago in prisons? And that's a really good point you make, because if the Home Office and the UK government can't actually put safety standards in place, safety and quality standards in place in the UK, but they're suggesting that they're going to be able to monitor them in Rwanda, I would doubt that. I would doubt that. And even when we look at the beds and breakfasts in the hotels, some of the places that are being used, even in Glasgow, if would you want to live there, Shan, if I went down there? And I think that's a measure of, if you wouldn't want to live there, or you wouldn't even want to stand in a place, in a room for 5 seconds, that's probably a good idea to say you shouldn't put another human being in it.
So the human side of this is huge. It's just, it seems like we've missed something. And from a business perspective, when there's the record amount of vacancies that we've had since records began, whichever stat you want to use, that there's, as you mentioned, Elaine, 85% of this population of people worked before they came to the UK. So it's not like they're coming here to claim benefits and live the easy life, which is obviously not. They want to work, and they've fled whatever they've fled. So there's issues that need dealt with. They've come. These poor people have come here for a reason. So to get away from whatever they're getting away from, and they want to work. So at a time when we have record vacancies, it sounds to me that we've just made it so hard to allow, even if whilst waiting for a decision. Elaine, you touched on this about the House of Lords, about the recommendation, but they can't work whilst they're waiting for a decision. So then they've spent that lot of time, the skills have eroded, and been really brutal. What use to society are they once they've come through that process, because they haven't worked for so long? So it's really, really frustrating to watch and see from a business perspective. And for the first time, I'm hearing as the business voice is becoming stronger and stronger on this, because there's a need, and there's a need for skills. There's people with skills, but we just don't want them to work. And it's at the core of all of this. Can I just, if I take this as we're coming to a close here about Ukraine and what's been happening there, we've seen this it seems to be that this, the horrors of what are happening currently and have been happening in Ukraine, and people, desperately needing help and support. I hear stories regularly, see stories regularly of some of the exploitation that's going on in Europe, in mainland Europe. It's not just anecdotal, this is organised criminal activity around the borders of Ukraine that are, using social media to pick up those people fleeing, who majority of them tend to be females and children. And there's a real fear, I have a real fear this is going to manifest itself in Scotland. And the reason I say that is because I just go into some of the Facebook groups for Homes for Ukrainians, and it's awful. It scares the living daylights out of me. It's just not safe for many of these people. At the heart of it is that those people in Scotland and the UK have said, yes, we'll open our homes up, you can come and stay with us. But in reality, there's badness, as you've mentioned. The evil people don't come in from other countries. They're actually within. If you're talking about bad people, they're in our country as well, looking to exploit people. So, I see a huge risk there that can come through from the Homes for Ukrainian scheme, from the difficulty that it creates as well, because we haven't made it easy. So it's obviously much easier for a Ukrainian national now to come to the UK than it is something a non-UK national. But we haven't made it easy. So to come here, there's a lot of bureaucracies to get through. But once you do come here, if you've come through one of the schemes, you're kind of open to exploitation. And Elaine, you've got some kind of first-hand experience here of Homes for Ukrainians and where it goes wrong. Because
we are certainly starting to hear through our partners, certainly the first people presenting, Ukrainians presenting as homeless, because they thought they had a situation worked out, or they came because they thought they had a home, but actually when they arrived, either the person wouldn't let them in, or there's another occasion where they didn't feel comfortable with that individual in the house, and then there was an argument and they had to leave. Now, that's an obvious consequence. We've not fortunately heard anything about anyone being hurt yet, or being abused, but we certainly think that we can see that there are sites out there, and we can see why people want people to come. The £350 thank you payment from the government as well is a bit of a strange one, because we're wondering what that's about. Are people going to say, well, come and do housework for me, and then you can stay here, because we're hearing that that's possibly happening. And then there's more insidious things. I mean, and our government talk about criminality a lot, and what we would say is every move that's being made by the government is actually creating a better situation for criminals to operate in. And it's going to create, when you create more desperation and you create more, if people can't, if you can't pay for your own basic human needs, you will do just about anything.
You're vulnerable, Elaine, isn't it?
You're vulnerable.
You're desperate,
you're vulnerable. And the more desperation you create and the more issues you create, the more criminality. It's a breeding ground. So I would say, actually, I'm astonished, and Ashley, I don't know what your opinion is, but the government say that they're doing things that will stop crime. And what we see is, and the UN and every charity I'm speaking to and lawyers say that they seem to be creating an environment for more criminals.
Yeah, no, I think you're completely right. And it's just, I think we think this is going to happen. And I'm worried for 6 months' time, to see actually, once people are here in numbers, what actually is happening, how many people. And, I think we need to remember, like, you said that you've not had any reports of abuse, but the fact is that even if they were happening, those individuals are less likely to report it, or to be able to report it in the first place. So, if it does happen, and unfortunately I think it will, we're never going to know the full scale of it. And that's a big problem.
It seems to me, I mean, some of the stories, they're easy to access. The Danish national who jumped in his Tesla, arranged to meet two females at the border, picked him up and purported to be a doctor. He wasn't. He took them to a hotel. And these two females, they realised what he was wanting to do, and they had to get the manager to help. That just happened 2 weeks ago, and that was somebody from Denmark. So it's the thought of what you've mentioned there, Elaine, is it if you look at some of the social media that's going on just now and the matching service that's being done, and I'm holding my phone in my hand because that's how easy it is to do, is that, you know, there's Ukrainian nationals putting, oh, I'm great at cooking, I'm great at cleaning, a picture of themselves and their child or whatever it is. Yeah. And it's just awful. It's just not managed. And
do you know what I would say as well? I think we have to remember that in any humanitarian crisis, around 42% of refugees will be children. In the Ukrainian situation, it's higher than that. So when we look in the UK about our getting it right for every child and all the safeguarding laws that we've put in place for the historical abuse that we've found in this country, which there has been massive problems. And in Scotland, they've created an organisation called Redress Scotland, which is dealing with historical abuse. I really fear for children because we're putting children into people's homes. And, you know, the safeguarding things that are going on in the UK, I don't believe there is enough safeguarding and checks in this scheme. And we've got to ask again, why the UK government, and it was a different department, it wasn't the Home Office that came up with this scheme. I've got to ask again, why the government came up with this scheme. Let's transfer the responsibility of looking after refugees. Let's transfer our international responsibilities to ordinary UK citizens who've got absolutely no training, no resources, no access to English language, no access to lawyers, no access to trauma training, no access to counsellors. And let's suggest that that's going to be a very happy situation. I would say that it's a cynical scheme as well, because I don't think you'll find that the numbers of people, I think the Prime Minister said, unlimited amounts of Ukrainians will come here. No, they won't.
No.
I don't
because
think
even though we were saying that this scheme's easier, it's still really bureaucratic. Like there's forms and like if English isn't your first language, like it's such a lengthy process to try and navigate that, you know, some people, well, yeah, a lot of people will be put off from doing it in the first place. Why
would you come here when you have the choice of the rest of Europe that you could go to? And so we've not made it particularly welcoming. Well, I suppose there's a business. So, you know, the reason that we exist at SAMS is to raise awareness of the issues of exploitation. In my own naivety, years gone by when we started SAMS, I didn't consider for 1 minute that the refugee population or those seeking asylum, the risk of exploitation. Actually, the nature of what the situation that they're in means that they are so open to this, to exploitation, and will have been and will always be. So it'll become a key strand of the message that we get across through Scotland against modern slavery. Thank you very much. A really direct and open conversation, Ashley and Elaine. As always, that was a real insight, and I think we could go on for another couple of hours here because there's a lot more that we could get through. We've got the main points done. If anybody needs more information, is listening or watching, Ashley.Fleming is a senior associate at Harper Macleod, and our contact details will be on the link to YouTube. Elaine.Cameron is the chief exec of the Refugee Survival Trust. And again, the contact details for the RST will be on there too. If anybody needs anything else, just contact me through Scotland Against Modern Slavery and I can make introductions. Elaine and Ashley, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, folks.
Bye-bye.